welcome to Legal Bytes Over Coffee, an ENS podcast where legal insight meets coffee conversation. I'm Priyanka Raj from the ENS TMT team, and every 2 weeks I'm joined by a guest from across our African offices or an industry partner like we have today or a client to discuss what's happening at the intersection of tech, regulation, and business. Together, we unpack stories making headlines, the challenges emerging in practice, and the contractual and governance questions organizations are navigating in an increasingly digital world. Pour yourself a cup and let's get into this week's Legal Bites. Today's episode is slightly different because we're talking about something I've increasingly seen in practice over the last few years, which is the reality that tech compliance and governance challenges can't be solved in silos anymore. And I've had the wonderful opportunity to work closely with the team at CyberLogic and broadly the Hyperclear Tech Group and across a number of clients that we service where it's not just legal advice that is being provided. We are doing implementation, operationalization, and tech alignment together with the clients to ensure that they are achieving compliance meaningfully. And I really love working with the CyberLogic and Hyperclear group specifically for this purpose. So I'm really excited to have two guests joining me today from the broader Hyperclear Tech group, both bringing very different but complementary perspectives to the conversation. So first we have Francois Creel, Client Success Principal at CyberLogic. Francois specializes in a bit of everything. We like to call him a lawyer as well, but for professional and legal reasons we can't. But he's been with me for several years now, walking the walk, and he is doing a lot of impressive stuff in the IT advisory space, doing digital transformation, change management, and he works very closely with organizations navigating quite complex technology and governance challenges, and he does it exceptionally well. And joining him is Francine Johannes, who leads business risk across the Hyperclear Tech Group, and she brings a very strong risk and governance lens to technology and cyber resilience and operational compliance and all of that. So, Francois, Fran, I should say, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Priyanka. We are so happy to be here, and as always, thank you for having us and for inviting us to support ENS and also clients.
Fran, such a pleasure. And hi, Fran, how are you doing?
Yeah, thank you for having us today, Priyanka.
It's a pleasure. So I thought I would start off with a question that perhaps each of us here can easily answer, but would give our listeners a clearer, shall I say, a hyper clear picture of the business and what Hyperclear Tech and CyberLogic does specifically. And Francois, I thought maybe you could just paint that picture for us.
Sure, thanks, Priyanka. So Hyperclear Tech has several technology businesses under its wing or umbrella, if I can say. So that would be 17 companies, over 500 customers, and we have, I would say, a capability that can help address any particular technology challenge. In short, so CyberLogic, where I reside, my capability is the largest of the group of companies. We specialize in managed IT security and, of course, IT advisory, which I lead. And from a practical perspective, we've been working, of course, in association with ENS on client matters, where we have to solve for complex legal and governance challenges simultaneously. So that's a little bit of an overview of the group. We have clients who are either mid-corps and fast scaling or established enterprise and corporate customers and have established a good presence in the market over the years. I think I'll give over to Fran just to share a little bit more about what you look after in the group, Fran, and your areas of expertise. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yes, as Priyanka has mentioned, I lead the business risk team in the Hyperclear group, tech group side. We do take care mostly of everything legal, internal, client-facing or third party, as well as compliance. Have in the past received great guidance also from Priyanka on that side. And then anything risk management. So establishing intelligent risk culture, making sure we take care of our risks and all, slotting back into good governance across all our different businesses in the group.
Thanks, both. And it's exactly for these reasons and for everything you're explaining. I've been so excited working with you over the last few years and the work that we continue to do together today. So before we get into today's discussion, we always start with coffee. I'm going to ask each of you how you take yours. I actually know how you take yours, Francois, but I'm going to give you the room to tell us how you take your coffee. And then you can, Fran, I don't expect you to guess how I take mine, but I'm going to put that pressure on Francois. But Francois, we talk about coffee a lot, don't we? Like I've been coming to you seeking counsel on coffee machines and how loud a coffee machine is so it doesn't wake my baby and all of that. So coffee is one of our, I think, love languages as two friends.
Yes, I am a little bit of a coffee geek, so to speak.
Yeah.
And of course, I had a small coffee business when I was a student way back when. So I think that really helped motivate my choice, which is a double espresso or black Americano. No milk, no sugar. But I promise I'm not as serious as that drink choice sounds.
It does make you sound like a very bitter person, Francois.
Exactly.
I think all your sweetness just balances it out.
Oh, thank you.
There you go. And Fran, and yourself?
Um,
Do you
I
drink
am
coffee?
maybe one of those rare people, actually do, but I'm one of those rare ones who only drinks 1 cup a day.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I also only
Yeah,
drink
I
one
don't
cup.
get that often. Everybody's like very surprised that I only drink 1 cup, but I like it very simple, like a cappuccino, but no sugar. And at home, it's the, Nespresso machines.
Oh yes, that sounds great. When I was in university, at my peak, I was drinking 8 cups of coffee a day, and I think I knew I had a problem when I think I could see my body vibrate. Like I was
Oh,
just thinking, okay, this is too much. And then I'm very happy that I now only have one, unless I'm having like a tricky day. Today is one of those days, but I'll have two. But I know my cutoff is 12 o'clock. If I have any coffee beyond that, then sleep is going to be very difficult to achieve. But Francois, can you remember how I take my coffee?
Gosh, I wanted to add, like my GP said she'll fire me as a patient if I go over 3 a day. So restrictions have been enforced and also post 12 p.m. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And if you're like with
Frank,
Discovery Vitality as well, I'm pretty sure their health questionnaires also ask how many
yes,
coffees do you have? And it affects your age now. Hey.
yes. You get I become eligible at a certain point of the day, and then I can have my next cup.
Yeah.
But to your point, didn't you venture more into the flat white arena recently?
Very good memory. I am a very flat white gal. But yeah, that is how I take it. I actually wish I was using my Nespresso machine more, Fran, because then I can get a really nice cappuccino vibe, because I think that might be my preference. But I like starting my day with a nice flat white. But the coffee machines that we've been discussing, Francois, recently, I'm going to be getting one of those now. So I think I'll be able to get that cappuccino, especially for middle of the day. I love that. A cappuccino at the middle of the day.
Fantastic. I'm glad.
All right, so Francois and Fran, or we can call you Fran 1 and Fran 2, as we discussed when we were prepping for this. But our next segment is called In the News or Tech Trends. And I just like to start with it to, before we get into anything that's too deep or too tech heavy, we just talk about what's going on around us. And I thought that I would talk about the draft paper that has been published by our Home Affairs Minister, Leon Schreiber. He's published a paper for comment that is ultimately going to move South Africa toward a smartphone-based digital ID. These draft rules see the introduction of a digital ID via an app that he's calling My Mzansi. And the idea is that it won't replace our existing smart ID cards. It's going to run in parallel with that. So the idea from the paper is that banks and other trusted private players would also be helping with enrollment and getting updates for the National Population Register and all of that. And no one is going to be forced to use the digital ID. It's just going to be enabled to help services just flow a bit more seamlessly as the country and services and sectors become more digitized. So as a tech lawyer, as a tech geek, I'm very excited for this. I want to see where it goes and what the final paper looks like. But the paper is out for public comment. So if anyone does want to submit comments on it, you have until the 6th of June, so it's just under a month before it is due. There's no sign of that date being moved out yet. It only got published this week for comment, so let's see what happens. But yeah, I remain glued to my screen to see what the final paper looks like and how it's going to affect everything. Francois, from your side, any interesting concepts? I know you guys are always doing interesting podcasts and lots of think pieces around tech concepts. Anything you want to share from your side?
Thanks, Priyanka. Yeah, I've recently returned back from Europe, and what is interesting when you are there is you see how these technologies and platforms have already been introduced, and things like the passport control, for example, for EU citizens, that is now completely electronic or almost like self check-in style at airport controls. So I see what is being introduced is going along a similar line. But of course, what struck me when I was there is just how mature the European market is in terms of its enforcement and awareness around data protection, broadly speaking, and how people appreciate the technology supporting it and the impact. So I think South Africa is starting to introduce these digital platforms, and we're in the earlier stages of maturity. And if we consider this trend, what's very relevant for me is to look at this through a zero trust lens. Now, of course, it's a bit of a buzzword these days in cybersecurity circles. So I just want to really make it simple. And there are three principles I think we need to keep in mind just practically that I wanted to raise. And the three principles to highlight is never trust, always verify, least privilege, and assume breach and monitor. So if comments and invitation to comment is considered, I would actually encourage the audience to keep those three principles in mind when commenting because of the significance of the data that we're discussing. As a side note, we acquired a business last year, NB Consult, who is a true expert in the zero trust framework. They actually consulted to Microsoft directly in Seattle on Microsoft Zero Trust Adoption Framework, which is now referenced globally, aligning to internationally recognized principles like NIST SP 800 207. So we really do have that subject matter expertise in-house now, and are starting to encourage clients and stakeholders more broadly to consider those three principles when we're talking about changes, like what is being proposed, and commenting and making timeliest comments with those three principles in mind. I hope that's a meaningful contribution.
I love it, Francois. It is. And what I also wanted to just add on zero trust is that it's a much higher threshold than the security measures we see required in data privacy instruments like POPI, GDPR, and so on, and even joint standards that are affecting a lot of our FI clients. And it is best practice. And I really encourage organizations to, rather than go for the minimum, which is adopting reasonable and adequate security measures, go for gold, adopt the zero trust, because it really makes sure that everything is secured, the integrity of data and confidentiality and how systems work. It really would sing quite beautifully in an organization and mitigate risk, globally for that organization. So I love that you brought that up. And it's something that actually inspired an event that we're going to be doing a few times together this year. We're calling it a bit of a road show. We're doing it in Johannesburg and then Cape Town, and then at your Technopark office as well, in Stellenbosch, where we're doing a data breach simulation. And I'm so excited for it, Francois. It's going to be amazing, but we're just going to get, hopefully, a lot of senior members from organizations like CEOs and heads of legal and information officers and CISOs and all of that to just get into a room and work through a simulation with us and just stress test their internal dynamics as an organization, how they respond to a breach, and what they think the strategy that works should be.
I'm very excited as well. And what I thought is good to share with the audience, that part of your brain that regulates the fight, flight, freeze, or flustered response, I added flustered, is called the amygdala. And it's only when we're confronted with a risk scenario that we actually see how we behave towards ourselves, towards others, and what type of reaction and decisions we make in the moment. So we can have beautiful policies and incident response plans and so forth. But when a risk materializes, we actually see how we behave and lead. So those zero trust principles are very important, and it will influence the design of the simulation. And there's a lot of curveballs. We've recently, with the IAPP in Cape Town, facilitated an event similar to that, where a few curveballs came up in the simulation event, and it was really great participation from the audience and to see how they responded, and also where the room disagreed with each other was fantastic. So we hope to see similar conversations come up in our event series, and look forward to seeing who signs up. So I'm sure Priyanka will share more of the details, but we look forward to welcoming you there, to see you there.
I'm really excited for it. And what you're saying is actually making me think of, you're so right. Like, I think unless you're confronted by an actual risk scenario, you don't really know what you're going to do. And it's like that question of, okay, your house is on fire, what are you going to take? What do you say first? And I've always battled with that question, because I always think, what would I take? And I think unless I'm actually under attack, I don't know what my answer will be.
The last year in the United Kingdom in particular has seen horrendous data breaches, and it's well publicized. Marks and Spencer's, Jaguar Land Rover, and so on, how they've been affected. And I think in the case of the co-op, if I recall correctly, they ran to the server room and just started pulling cables to prevent the breach from worsening or extending. So those are interesting scenarios that we'll play out ourselves. See, well, what do you do when you're faced with an impossible decision or task? So we hope it's a timely point in the cybersecurity space to put this forward, and look forward to seeing who of you join us in that event series.
Next is our in practice segment where we chat about a challenge or a situation we're each dealing with in our respective spaces that might be relevant to our listeners, and we can bring in real world experience into the conversation, Francois and Fran, and practical insights we might have on technology or regulatory or any contractual issues that organizations are navigating right now. From my side, I thought I would kick off with something that kept me up till very late last night, but it was the due diligence investigation that I'm working on, and it was actually a really interesting way to talk about this because of what you just mentioned, Francois, about Hyperclear Tech acquiring NB Consult. I think you said it was last year, but on the topic, specific topic of companies acquiring tech companies or acquiring businesses where the tech or the data or the systems is quite relevant and material to the acquisition. It's exactly what I'm involved in now, is looking at an acquisition. You know, we hear a lot about the commercial side of acquisitions, like what's the price and what's the synergies and all of that. But unless you're in my space, you don't really hear much about what's actually going on beneath the surface and what the technology is that actually runs that business. And a lot of people might, cast their eyes aside if they're thinking it's tech, is not relevant, this isn't a tech business we're acquiring. But these days, tech is pretty much the thing that is, kind of fueling every business. So the transaction I've been involved in, it's a large cross-border disposal involving a company group, and it's operating across several jurisdictions. So it's not just SA. And the IT part of the due diligence threw up a lot of interesting issues for me. I've been doing due diligence investigations for many, many years now, and this one specifically was quite a challenge because the thing that I think catches people off guard is that when you are acquiring a business, you assume you're getting all the systems that run with it. Like, okay, I'm buying the house, I'm going to get the furniture as well. So you think, okay, I'm going to get their ERP platform, I'm going to get their, points of sale software or payment switches or whatever we're dealing with. I'm going to get everything, but often you don't. And the systems that often sit under, enterprise license agreements that are held by the parent entity or a sister entity elsewhere in the group often doesn't actually flow down to every other entity in the group, or the target business we are looking at then is really just benefiting from all of these licenses more operationally than contractually. There might not be any contractual relationship between that target business and the ultimate software licensor. It might be happening at a group level only. And yes, these group agreements have things like benefits clauses. It'll say something like, cool, Hyperclear Tech, you're getting this license, but every entity in your group can also use the license at, no extra cost. Whoever is an affiliate, whoever you're controlling, will have access to this license. But the issue that comes up, and what I was looking at specifically, is what are the material systems that the target business is using, and what happens once the preferred buyer actually gets all those shares in that business? Because the moment the transaction closes, the 100% shares acquisition, that target will then cease to be part of the seller's group. So that guest pass expires. They're no longer an affiliate that's under the control of the group, which means that even if they have to continue using this ERP system or the Microsoft license or whatever, it might be that they're actually not allowed to use it. The license was at a group level only, and the buyer is then left with a position of, okay, what do I have? We're using a license that we're actually not allowed to use. Do we have IP issues from day one of closing? So it's a very interesting transaction. And it's going to take quite some time for the client to ready its environment and to give proper notices to the software licenses to make sure that they are able to actually carry on using these services once the transaction closes. So I thought I would share that. A very, very legal specific issue, more not so much in Francois in your world, but more in France and my world
Yeah.
of things. But it's very interesting. I thought I would share it with you because you have, you guys are in the business of acquiring tech companies and getting bigger and better. But what are you busy with? What can you share from your side?
I'll share first and then would love Brand's views as well. What I would like to contribute first is it's very important for any business to first discern, do you need to build or buy or partner for your technology enablement needs?
Mm,
For that reason, and what you're saying is so interesting and true, there are perceptions and maybe associations that acquiring a technology business means XYZ capability. And if you're acquiring a business, you want to clearly know what are you getting for that and what's the value of it. And I think we should separate two things. And one is the actual technology itself, which is increasingly commoditized and license based, like you're saying, Priyanka.
mm,
And then the talent side of it. Does it make sense to just partner with a company or to buy it is the first just open thought
mm,
that I wanted to raise. In terms of the technology and the licensing, I actually think this is not a bad opportunity, Fran, if you agree, just to give some context on what we call pass-through terms. I know we thought we'd chat a little bit later about this in the podcast conversation
Yeah.
today, but maybe this is a relevant time to actually raise and give a little bit of context on what pass-through terms actually mean.
Yeah. Thank you, Francois. So definitely in our world, specifically in the IT and cybersecurity space, we don't always, build everything ourselves. We rely on global platforms and vendors, um, and providers and tools and subscriptions to deliver our services. And those vendors always have their own ULAS, service terms, usage rights, and we are then legally, required to pass those through to our clients and end users. Now, where it becomes tricky is when the clients sometimes ask us, but why must we accept these terms and why can't you just change them? And unfortunately, the short answer or honest answer is we can't. We cannot or don't have the ability to negotiate with these global, giants and vendors out there. And we also can't override them, contractually. So we then sit in the middle where we need to be accountable to our clients, but we're also bound by vendors. So realistically, we just need to, we don't want to, and what the client really needs is for them to understand that, we want to be transparent about our ecosystems and our services. So I think it comes down to, in that sense, that we always bring some awareness and collaboration. Let's walk through it together so we can help you understand what it is. And let's make sure everybody do understand what they're signing up for.
If I can also just come in on that because I deal with that issue all the time, Fran, as well, is how do we deal with the OEM terms? And I often
Yeah.
advise clients who are receiving IT services from like a reseller or a company, and they have to pass down these terms. And I will always try to figure out, okay, how do we deal with these terms that have been passed down because they're unilateral. We don't have any ability to negotiate. And there are so many models that I see work, and I'll share some insights, and maybe some of these you're already doing from your side or might be helpful for listeners to also understand. But the one way, the best scenario is if the client is actually able to agree those terms directly with the OEM without a partner needing to play a role, then that's great. So we've had a situation where a client's getting, like say, a Microsoft service from a third party, that third party might say, yeah, we can try to set up a chat between you and Microsoft, but beyond that, we can't do anything. Our hands are tied. They might come back and say, nope, we're not going to entertain this. Or they might say, they're paying us a lot of money. Maybe we will, accommodate some requests. And I have seen that happen sometimes, but a lot will depend, and your client might look to you just for some kind of facilitation if you do have that relationship with the OEM to say, listen, the client wants bespoke terms. Can we get it? What can I tell them? What can we give them? Especially if it's a big corporate client, which a lot of all of your clients are. It can be, not all of your clients, many of your clients are, but it can be helpful, I think, for you as well to show value as that sort of middle guy. Like, what can we do just to help you? And sometimes you'll have to say, look, guys, we can't really do anything. These are the terms, take it or leave it. What we can do is we can have our own agreement with you um, as as the reseller to the client. Yes, we're passing down terms, but here's what we can do to accommodate your concerns. You're worried about, I don't know, not knowing when the services are going to be down. We can help you that. We can report it to you. You can pay extra, but we have that visibility and we have that access and we can give that to you. So I have seen various things work, and a lot of it does come down to the who the OEM is. Some of them have a very rigid rule. We do not negotiate our terms. Our terms are take it or leave it. Some of them might say, look, we're very big, but you're also very big clients. So we might accommodate something here. And then your role in that as, the partner is just to kind of be the go-between and not to put yourself in between and now have like a tripartite agreement, because I would definitely stay away from those. They're very messy. Is to have, reseller and OEM and client all on the same paper. It makes it very difficult for a client or for anyone in that transaction to know what their obligations are, what's their liability, and what's their risk exposure. So keeping it clean, having direct agreements between you and clients and OEM and client, and that OEM client direct agreement would either look like just here are the passed down terms, here's the URL, these are their T's and C's, or we'll set up an engagement with you separately, you can negotiate separately, leave us out of it, but we'll be kind of in the vicinity if you have any questions. Because what I have seen happen, I'm not sure if you've experienced any of it recently or at all, is there'll be a lot of finger pointing. OEM will say, but client, aren't you getting this from our partner? And the partner might say, no, client, we're actually waiting for this from the OEM. So sometimes the client is then caught between these two entities and feels frustrated. So the value I think you can have in that process, in that relationship, can be quite important.
Yeah, thank you. Very
Yeah.
insightful.
Yeah. Anything else from your side?
If I can contribute.
Yes.
So interesting that you mentioned that. So our client success team in CyberLogic is exactly expected to play that coordination role to give the client transparency as well in terms of what are they buying from who and what is the agreement.
Yeah.
And before we enter a renewal period, which we now are approaching 90 days at least before the time, is to help client understand, well, what are the terms that support this proposal. Of course, we are putting forward recommendations that are in the client's best interest, first and foremost, and they are made up of a variety of tools and services and subscriptions. And that is just important. I think it's a best practice that a managed services provider has that conversation with the client well beforehand to avoid the confusion. And I think there's also an interesting point to make in that the world runs off these services. And the term I also find is important to discuss with a company as to why. Like, why is the term 12 months? And what it requires in terms of committing to talent or whatever it may be to effectively run what the world runs on, which is a server and security and so forth. Just coming back to the original point of an acquisition, I think it's worth just doing a proper due diligence in advance and not making any assumptions. So working with ENS and having a partner like ENS go through any acquisition consideration beforehand, should you even acquire the business, and then what to look for. I just want to circle back to, I think is important just to raise before making assumptions and jumping in and seeing, well, there's licenses and all sorts of things here that maybe you have in your business that runs a certain way, but in this business you're thinking of acquiring has been set up completely differently with completely different terms and pass-through terms. So I thought I'd also just highlight that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it can't be overstated. It's really just making sure that you are, I think you have a clear strategy. And I've worked now on a few of these transactions where the client strategy, whether they're buying or even selling their shares or their business, sometimes the strategy itself, they're not internally aligned and it keeps changing. Whether it's commercial reasons or new information comes to light, like what we're discussing now, where like actually there's going to be more risk if I approach the transaction this way. Let me try to structure it differently. So it is important to think about it carefully and also to understand what is the whole point of this transaction. Why do you want to acquire? What's the end goal here?
Correct. 100%.
All right, we've spoken about a lot of things in this last hour already, and we're almost at the end of the episode. So I'm sad that we're going to have to say goodbye soon. But I thought we could end with a very juicy segment, which is called Clause of Choice, where I ask my guests, in this case, both Fran and Francois, bring a contractual clause that they've been thinking about lately that's maybe been affecting them in their space, and to see, what we can discuss about it. So, what have you both brought for me today?
So, Priyanka, something that we've been experiencing with large enterprise contracts is we often see things like uncapped liability and very broad indemnities. And on paper, that makes sense for a big corp. But even for established businesses like ours, one single uncapped claim could literally put us out of business. So even when you have insurance, and we do, insurance is capped. There's always a limit. So if a contract expects, unlimited liability, you're essentially taking on risk that no insurance can fully cover. And what we sometimes struggle with is finding that middle ground. We're not trying to avoid accountability. We absolutely stand behind our services, but there needs to be like a balanced, commercially realistic approach to the risk. And I think where it becomes difficult in when there isn't openness to that conversation, when it becomes a standard terms, take it or leave it situation, and businesses can feel forced into accepting risk that isn't sustainable. So the real ask, from our side would be, let's have that conversation. Let's understand the impact on both sides, and let's create from the start a healthy partnership where it protects both parties, not expose one disproportionately.
Yeah, absolutely, Fran. And it is a very, very difficult conversation. I think regardless of whether you're the customer in that situation or the vendor in that situation, as you guys find yourself in, the considerations on both sides, I understand. And I have to understand because I have to negotiate for both sides as often as the case. But it has a real impact. I mean, legal will be in the room and will negotiate these clauses, but you just sit there, cross fingers, and hope that you don't have to actually see these clauses being enforced, because the exposure it can bring to a company is quite great. And I've seen it being approached in many different ways. parties might just try to limit their liability to what they're insured for, and the other party says, nope, I don't want that. I want more than what you're insured for, and so on. And a lot of it is, a risk that you need to internally operationalize, like maybe, and I'm not saying it's the case for you, but I'm saying for a lot of organizations to actually refresh their insurance and make sure, okay, what is our PI cover? If we're in that space of services, or how do we mitigate this risk from occurring? If uncapped liability is something that is being, like, it's almost the reason for the whole deal to break down, what can we reasonably do to accommodate the ask? How do we mitigate this risk? Do we, for example, implement zero trust to make sure that no one has access to information who shouldn't have access to it? And it's a very often a commercial decision. I mean, liability clauses are drafted by legal and negotiated by legal, but the drivers behind it are almost entirely commercial. Legal will provide guidance regarding, this is what the risk is. You're being asked for an uncapped liability for IP breaches, but what does this actually mean in the agreement? Or we can translate that stuff, but the call is always, I think, commercial and strategic, and who your counterparty is. How important is this deal for you? How critical is it to your business to get this business from a client, or to get the service from a vendor? So it's a very nuanced conversation, and every time I have it, it sounds very different.
If I
Franz,
can add,
thanks.
what we do fundamentally delivers competitive advantage for our clients. It's a fundamental part of the business model, and we are heavily intertwined operationally. The request always at the beginning of any new client relationship is, we are partnering with you. And there is, in the technology space, risks that evolve weekly, sometimes daily. And so it's very difficult also to put the onus and the responsibility for all the risk on one party, where if you're delivering a competitive advantage together, then I feel it's a shared responsibility. And we're also at an interesting point in time where supplier corporate client relationships are quite topical, and we employ a lot of people among us in South Africa at the moment. And I feel broadly our society can do with any additional employment or job that we create. So my thought, Priyanka, is, in negotiation, what sort of, can I say, tips or guidance do you have as a tier one firm in these conversations? What are like the guiding or partnership or relationship principles that you would encourage both parties to take in conversations like these?
It may sound silly, but it's almost to actually understand in plain language, what are we fighting about? Because I'll often be in a position where I'm arguing a liability clause, and my counterparty doesn't even understand what that means in their business. They haven't thought, why am I asking for an IP, uncapped liability for IP? What is the risk I'm actually trying to do here if I'm not getting a service that is dependent on IP, or using, the IP, for example? I mean, it's very rare that will happen, but it's sometimes just coming back to, why does this matter to you? As a question for both parties, why does this matter to you? Because if it's just, oh, it's our policy, we can't do it, then that's not a good place to start a relationship of collaboration or partnership between a customer and their vendor. So I really don't like hearing that argument, like it's a policy for our group, we just can't accept it, because that's something that is then flexible. If it's a policy that's subjective, then it can change. I need to understand what is the real reason that is driving your ask for this requirement, and how do we accommodate that in another way if I can't give you an uncapped liability, or if you can't, accommodate that. How else do we achieve this? Sometimes uncapped might really be the only way to unlock the issue, or to deal with it. So, for example, uncapped liability for causing death. No one's going to negotiate that. There are certain things that are accepted as market practice. And I think we have to balance what is market practice and what is practically the issue here that we're fighting for. I've been in negotiations where a party will be negotiating a data privacy clause, like where I've been acting for the vendor and the customer's really pushing for this uncapped liability for privacy. And then I'm like, but what? Why do you want this? We're not processing any of your personal information. So why does it matter to you so much if we don't actually have any access to it or control over your information? And then that often changes the conversation. And then because it is often a commercial discussion, if you're finding you're reaching deadlock, I often find the best way sometimes is to get the higher ups talking to each other. And sometimes that is also where the deadlock happens, but sometimes it's where it gets broken, is we have the CISO of this company talking to his equivalent or her equivalent in another company, and they're like, why are our legal teams fighting about this? What is the actual issue? And there, the practical application of these clauses really, can be seen is what happens at escalation. So my biggest tip is really just to, without getting into very specific issues, and I can chat to you both about it in your specific context afterwards, but really just coming down to, why does this matter to you, and using that as your starting point to figure out how else do we achieve this. Because if it's not unlimited liability, maybe we can offer you an indemnity. Maybe we can offer you a dedicated resource so you can monitor your service levels and you don't have to worry about service level breach happening randomly. Small things like that to see how it can be accommodated.
I'll go back to Fran as well, but I think bringing it back to the why is just such a good negotiation principle for me. That is standing out for me, Priyanka, from your overall guidance. If you come in as external counsel to all the parties. Fran, what do you think?
Oh, I think it was great advice, Priyanka, and definitely we've seen that happen before. Where if we just get to the bottom of what are you fighting for, and to get the right people from the start in the room, would have saved a lot of time. But yeah, thank you.
Yes, that's actually a very good point, Fran, is also getting the right people in the room. You'll be having the fights with the wrong people who are fighting for an issue. They don't understand. They don't talk to their business. They don't understand why they need it. And then you can't have a discussion. So I don't like having discussion with people who actually don't understand the services. Show me someone who understands the services we're receiving or that we're providing, and then we can have the discussion. Okay, and now we're gonna end off on a lighter note. It's a closing game for both of you. So to close things off, I always end each episode with my guests with a quick game. It's just rapid fire views, yes, no, and leaving very little room to justify. And I think for both of you, you'll probably struggle, as I do as well, to only limit myself to a yes, no answer. But my game today is called Who Panics First? So I'm going to give you a scenario, and you can tell me, which team do you think would panic first? Is it going to be legal? Is it going to be IT? Is it going to be risk, compliance, or business? Okay, so whatever, you can choose one of those. But I'm going to give you the first scenario, and I'm going to switch between you two. So, Francois, for you, major data breach. Who panics first?
Risk.
Yeah, risk.
Gonna be Fran.
Fran, yeah.
Maybe.
Actually, might be Christiana.
Yes.
Fran, next scenario. An AI tool has leaked confidential information. Who panics first?
Oh my word. Again, risk.
Next scenario is also for Fran. Regulator requests audit evidence. Who starts panicking?
Yeah, no, it's the compliance risk side.
Yes, yes. Francois, for you, critical vendor outage. Who's panicking?
Oh, we do. Client success it's all business and impact on the client, and yeah, that's
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
first response there.
Okay, and the last one, I think also for you, Francois, especially because you have your change management cap that you wear all the time, but cloud migration failure, who panics
Oh,
first?
The client.
yeah.
The
Great one.
100% the client. We fortunately have not seen that materialize as yet. But
Exactly.
yes, it's the client will feel like they've lost their data in that
Mm.
moment, and that
Mm-hmm.
will, it's a complete panic. But I think we've mitigated against any sort of risks in the past, fortunately, so that hasn't happened yet.
I'm indulging you there. You gave a very long explanation for a yes/no question, Francois, but
Sorry.
I'll forgive you. But all right, everyone, that's a wrap on today's episode of Legal Bites Over Coffee. Thank you to my guests for joining me with this conversation, and thank you to those of you who are joining us and listening. If you found this discussion useful, please subscribe or follow us on LinkedIn, or all of us are on LinkedIn, and join us again as we continue unpacking the legal bites behind Africa's digital economy. Until next time, keep the coffee warm and your governance questions hot.